Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Malte Meinshausen. I'm here, have the privilege of that being my office. Thank you for joining us here. First, let me acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people and the elders past and present. Now, today is one of our first live seminars where we have speakers sitting somewhere on the other side of the planet. We want to do that more often with speakers from Germany, etc. We recently had a video conference with ANU, which absolutely did not work. The internet was breaking the whole time. Maybe it was NBN, we don't know. But so let's keep fingers crossed that today's event is seemingly smooth. And today's event is on a fascinating topic. You will all have heard of blockchain, and probably half of you is going to be thinking blockchain, that's a furphy, that's a hype. We had many of those, and they are going to be going soon again. We are not going to hear blockchain events in 5 years from now. And the other half might think, well, this might be the enabler of that disruptive, motion that really speeds up the transition because we have so many little devices that can play a role in the electricity market. Well, let's hear today from Christoph Sutter. Christoph Sutter is the head, the director of the renewable energy division in the AXPO. AXPO is the largest Swiss retailer or Swiss electricity utility. So he oversees a large portfolio of renewables, and Switzerland, as you might imagine, in Europe, with all its beautiful mountains, is not only, or could not only be, the battery of Europe with all the pumped hydro. It's also playing a major role with wind power across Europe and innovative technologies like blockchain. So let's hear today, and we have around a 30-minute presentation, and then let's hear your questions, and let's probe whether blockchain is more on that incredibly ineffective protocol that will never really take off and is not fit for purpose for the energy market, versus really the blockchain or something similar could enable the transition even faster. So without further ado, let me hand over to Christoph. And Christoph, I think when you speak, you come also up here on the big screen. Thank you. Over to you, Christoph.
Thank you very much, Malte. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back at the University of Melbourne, albeit it's only virtually. I had the pleasure to be in your institute very early January this very year. Good memories. I remember, I think there is something like a table tennis meeting room, should be somewhere back there, if I'm correct. So great to be back. Thanks for the intro, Malte. As mentioned, my main job actually is running a renewable energy business of a utility. And you see here on the first slide what keeps me awake most of my work days. It's running wind farms like this offshore wind farm here in the North Sea, for example, or building new wind farms. This is a building site we're doing in France, onshore. So this is actually my daily business. But I have become the chairman of a company called LBlocks, and this is the spin-off we created early this year in the peer-to-peer trading business of renewable energy, and it uses blockchain technology. So that's kind of why I kind of jumped into this topic the last 2 years. Maybe one word on AXPO as well is we running mostly central power plants, hydro and nuclear in Switzerland. And our biggest project actually the last few years was building a new pumped hydro dam or installation in the Alps. It's a $2 billion investment, 1 gigawatt pump capacity. And I show this picture because I heard there is also in Australia and also in South Australia is I think discussions going on or reheated about pumped storage hydro. So we just did this huge investment here in the Swiss mountains, and it's about to get fully operational at the very moment. But now let's jump into the topic of the evening, blockchain. And if typically I talk on blockchain and energy to executives of the energy industry in Europe, and I see mainly 3 challenges when it comes to established energy players and blockchain. So the first, it's obvious, the challenge is technology. It's a new technology, it's fascinating, it's rather complex to grasp how to do it. So that's the challenge number 1. But challenge number 2 is finding business models with which you can still earn money as a company if you base your business model on blockchains. Because as you know, blockchain is a highly decentralized system. If you have a real pure blockchain play, there is not a hub that sits somewhere and it extracts money from the others. It's a very decentralized system. And so it makes it more challenging to find business models to still earn money. I don't say it's not possible, but you have to rethink the way you're running a company and the company is earning money if you use blockchain. You can do kind of fake blockchain type of things, but if you do pure blockchain, you really have to rethink the ways you do your business model. And third, the third challenge I see for energy players, established energy players in the blockchain and energy space, is the cultural element. And this is usually the point in time where I have to get rid of my jacket and my suit and say, okay, this doesn't work in the blockchain space. It's only small things, but if you look at who is running today the space of blockchain, it's not people in suits. It's people looking more like this with their hoodies, and on the hoodie you have the name of your company that soon goes to an ICO or so. And it's just a fact that it's a bunch of people who became multimillionaires last year. In the meanwhile, they lost a big part of the money again due to the volatility in the cryptocurrency space. But most of them, they are still pretty well off. And now, so they made a lot of money with cryptocurrencies, and now they are kind of crypto nerds or blockchain nerds. And now they are looking for other sectors, other applications for their technology, for the blockchain technology. Sometimes you have the impression that they have a great solution, that's a blockchain, and they're looking for problems out there to solve. And that's always a bit tricky. But coming back to Malte's question in the very beginning, whether it's a hype or kind of a future enabler of many things, I think it's very clearly both. It's clearly a hype, or it used to be a hype, a very overhyped thing last year and beginning of this year. It's cooling down a bit at the moment. But I think also it has elements that this technology could become very important and central in the years to come. We don't know yet exactly whether this happens and how exactly it happens, but I would say it has the potential, so it's worth to look at it. And that's also, we at Expo said, okay, only looking at it is not sufficient, only thinking about it is not sufficient, you have to get your hands dirty, you have to try things out and see how it works. That's what we're doing. So what I want to do now is I have a few slides. I don't do an introduction to blockchain, a systematic introduction, just a few thoughts on where the blockchain stands at the moment. Then I would like to give you a quick overview of the state of the market when it comes to blockchain and energy, and then quickly show you the example of our company LBlocks, what we do and how we do it. So it all started with the famous paper about 10 years ago on Bitcoin, and nobody knows who actually wrote it or who this Satoshi was, a person or a group. But anyway, I can only warmly recommend to read this paper. It's still very, although it was the very first one, I think it's still relevant, very relevant. It's only 9 pages. So people who are interested in not only Bitcoin, but how blockchains work, it's a good read to get started. And it's, yeah, as mentioned, the whole blockchain thing started with this paper. Blockchain, it has different elements or characteristics, but I think one very important is that it creates an immutable chain, and you can't erase or correct things. It's all there in the chain, in the different blocks that continue to be written, and the blocks are all linked to each other cryptographically. So it's there, and it's very transparent. So that's one of the very strong points of blockchains, and on the other hand, also one of the weaknesses. I come to that in a second. And then another element of the market is that we had seen this massive hype on one hand on the Bitcoin valuation, but also on these ICOs, so the companies that go and do, so to say, IPOs, or going public in the crypto space. And this is something I wanted to show you, but probably doesn't work here. Anyway, what you would see here is a video animation of all the ICOs we have seen the last years, and all these bubbles are ICOs and how much money they raised. And it goes over time, and you see it actually that in the time where we had this very high Bitcoin value, everything was bubbling and shooting up. And I think this is definitely not by chance. A lot of ICOs were fueled by the Bitcoin value. So I think my thesis is that many people who overnight became very rich on Bitcoin and became Bitcoin millionaires, they wanted to kind of divest a bit and to have a wider portfolio, but they wanted still to be in the blockchain space. So they took a lot of value from the Bitcoins they want, and which increased value. So they took some of these Bitcoins and invested this in all these ICOs, new companies that raised money. And as soon as the Bitcoin valuation went back again, there was not so much windfall profits, you can say, in the market. And you have seen this in the last few months in the ICO world. So the world where new companies want to raise money in the crypto world. There's a bunch of, it was a year ago, it was super easy to finance your new company through an ICO. You didn't have to have much. You just published a white paper and you went out and you raised a few millions. And these days are definitely over. I'm hearing more and more of, I would say, pretty good companies that want to raise, and that stopped the ICO because they did not reach the minimal target they want. But anyway, this is just a reflection on the current status of the ICO market. And coming back to the blockchain, and it's actually, as you know, it's a decentralized ledger, you could say, in the technology space. And you always have to think, okay, I do a decentralized database, so to say, or do I do a standard centralized database for whatever you want to do? And if you look at the blockchain space at the moment, I would say many blockchain companies and projects, they would better do a centralized database, because it's not really it's not really suited for blockchain. But it's obviously these days also a marketing thing if you do blockchain, so it sells easily. But it's a very clear trade-off. So you have a trade-off. I'm talking about today's blockchains. They will become more efficient, but at the moment they're very inefficient and slow. They are censorship resistant. Okay, that's good. But you have to balance that with whether you want an efficient and centralized database. And I don't want to go into details, but if you're interested in that, you should have a look at a decision tree proposed by the World Economic Forum, where you can go step by step through your project and see whether blockchain would be suitable, or you're better off with the central database. And then on the right side, you see a few hints where it makes more sense. So whenever you have a shared repository, or you have multiple writers, you have not enough trust in the system, you have lots of intermediaries you want to get rid of, and you have transaction dependencies. These are hints that it might make sense to use blockchain. If not, then better go with the database. Actually, we did the same journey. When we started our company, we wanted to implement 100% in the blockchain, and we found out this doesn't make sense. It's not efficient to do 100% in blockchain. I would say at the moment we have about 20% on the chain, and 80 is standard technology off chain, but I will come to that in a second. So now would like to go quickly through a state of the market as I see it at the moment, blockchain and energy. I see three overarching themes in this space. One is peer-to-peer trading of renewable energy. I will come back to that later, because our example is in that space. And if you look at Australia, I think Power Ledger is a very good example of a company working in that space. Then on the very right side, you have a bucket which I would call optimizing investments in renewable energy. Because renewable energy is typically very decentralized and still, compared to other technologies, rather small ticket sizes, many people think about how to standardize this space and how to make it more transparent and also more liquid. And to tokenize these investments is actually one of the ideas. It's still very young, but this is the idea, that you use blockchain technology, that you use token created by the blockchain for enabling these small investments, to make them liquid in the market. And this is the very latest development, to bring in transparency. For example, there are now funds in the renewable energy space that invest in wind and solar plants, and they want to sell it later. So they try to write all the data, all the O&M data, all the performance data of their assets into a blockchain, with the idea that it's easier to sell afterwards these assets. Because, you know, when you sell renewable energy assets these days, it's very difficult. You need to do a lot of due diligence, technical due diligence, because you want to know what you buy. And so a transparent system in the blockchain could help there. I just recently heard about people who try to do the same now for blockchain and batteries. So kind of the secondary market of batteries. It's the same thing. If you buy a second-hand battery, you want to know how many cycles they had and how it was operated. And so depending on that, it has still a lot of value or zero value, more or less. And so there's an idea or ideas that you put the history of batteries into blockchain to be able to sell it for a better price in the secondary market. So these are things in the space of how to invest and with the blockchain. And in the middle, the third bucket, the back-end optimization of wholesale trading, this is a straightforward thing. Come to my next slide. This is actually not really changing the whole world, but it's a straightforward plain vanilla business case, I would say. This is an example from Europe. You see on the right side the logos of almost all larger traders in Europe. So Axpo is in about more than 20 countries in Europe. We are actively trading with people on the ground. We'll be trading electricity and many commodities around it. So Axpo, but all the other traders as well, they joined forces and say, okay, we establish a blockchain to settle our deals, actually. You have to know, even kind of very standardized, large volume, day-to-day energy trades in Europe are done through brokers. But the broker would not be needed to find the counterparty. A company A, Axpo, knows exactly they want to do a deal with E.ON on the other side, and they have done this deal for hundreds of times, but they still need a broker for the settlement and all the back office stuff. And so the idea of that Enerchain project is to not need these brokers anymore. And obviously the business case is that you don't pay the brokerage fees anymore. So straightforward as mentioned, but it will not really change the world or how the world ticks. But this is an example of business cases that work in the chain. So if you look at last year, what happened in the investment space, depending on the source, it was 100 million or a few $100 million invested in blockchain startups in the energy space. You see the blue line or the blue parts is ICO, so through ICOs. But the point here is actually most money was raised through ICOs, these IPOs in the crypto space, and very little through conventional finance like VC or private equity. This is actually showing more or less the same. You see here over the time of last year until February this year, how much money was raised, and you can see companies like Power Ledger, VPower, Grid Plus, they raised significant amount of money with blue dots, which means ICOs. So 25, 30 million US dollars was reachable. And you have to know, kind of Power Ledger is a pretty advanced company in that space. It's still very young, but you see other companies, they are even much younger and they raise millions. So that's a bit of a special market. You would never do that in private equity, I would say. If you look at this money, where was it invested? It was mainly invested in peer-to-peer trading, green mining a bit, but the rest is still very insignificant. So big bunch of that money, and that's an indicator for where the business activities are, is in peer-to-peer trading. And this is a slide where you see that key stakeholders are clustering around some emerging platforms. We do not know yet which platforms will become important, but we do know if the blockchain space should deliver, it needs to have a few significant platforms. It doesn't make sense that everybody builds its own system and nobody follows. So it will be that some platforms will become strong and most players will work on them, and others will disappear again. So one strong platform is the Enerchain I just mentioned. This is the cluster around Ponton, which created the Enerchain platform. Another platform in the utility space is the Energy Web Foundation. It is on the top of the slide. There you have also kind of major energy companies, not only utilities, joining. And then on the right bottom corner, you see Power Ledger as kind of a smaller platform, but Australian origin, and they also try worldwide to attract players. So far, it's smaller players that work on their platform. So that's something to watch how this will develop, but it will develop platforms, I'm pretty sure. So trends for the next 12 months, I would say we will see less blockchain companies, so companies that just focusing on blockchain and try to find problems for it. We will see more companies with existing problems that find that the blockchain technology can help solving this problem. And we will see less finance through ICOs, so it cooled already down pretty much. And we will see more kind of traditional finance coming in, or traditional finance for small new companies like venture capital, or also corporate finance. So, for example, in the case of the spin-off of Expo, it's financed through the corporate of Expo, and you see this more and more. TEPCO as well in Japan is pretty active in that space. So now I would like to give you a quick glimpse into our project, or our company, LBlocks, before I would be very happy to come more interactively with you on the Q&A. So as mentioned, LBlocks is a peer-to-peer trading platform for renewable energy. We started about a bit more than 2 years ago with the concept, and I created that. As mentioned, we wanted to do 100% in the blockchain first, and then 2 years ago I had no clue about blockchain, so I had to dive into it, and then it became clear to me it's just inefficient to do everything on the chain, at least today's chains. And so what we now do is actually we focus very much, when it comes to the blockchain element, we focus very much on the guarantees of origin, so to say. So that we say we want to make sure that 1 megawatt hour of PV electricity is only sold once and not twice or thrice. And today, it depends on country to country, but for example, I know the European case a bit better. If you have also these guarantees of origin that make sure that you only sell a megawatt hour hydropower plant, for example, once, and you have national registries that register this, and you can trade between the national registries, but they, from a time-wise, they are not really. They don't have a high resolution. So they do balancing over 1 year, or max in Europe is over 1 month. So a megawatt hour produced in May gives a certificate in May, and you can sell this for somebody who wants a megawatt hour produced in May. But as you know, the electricity market is a very special. You have to generate and consume at the very same time, otherwise you have to have a storage solution. So there's a real trend that you want to know who is producing and who is buying this on a real-time basis. And so that's the idea behind it, that we say we want to make sure that this happens on a real-time basis, and we write these contracts of who sold to whom. At this time, we write this into the blockchain. All the matching, who has to offer what and who searches what, and do the match. This is done on a standard IT platform. It's a bit like Airbnb, you could say. I come to that in a second. But so what we see as use cases, first now we start clearly with the peer-to-peer marketplace. But we get a lot of calls from corporate clients who want to make sure, so they maybe have a target for becoming renewable energy 100, so they want to have a lot of renewable energy in their business, and they want to have a real thing that they say, okay, whatever I consume at a particular point in time, I want to buy the same amount at the same time. So they need solutions for that. And so we're working on a product also for corporate clients. And then the third level, we not yet work on that, will be on the mobility side, electric mobility. So this again gives just the summary, what we do. So we sell directly from the producer to the consumer. So in the midterm, you would not need any utility in between, to be blunt. I say in the midterm because at least in Europe at the moment, in most countries, it's not possible from a regulatory perspective. So what we do at the moment, we commercially, it's the producer that sells to the consumer, but legally, it goes through the utility, because otherwise, as mentioned, the regulation is not allowing direct sales. And here on this slide, you see these two on-chain and off-chain parts. So on top, we do the matching between the wind farm and the house, for example, on a peer-to-peer platform. This is kind of the Airbnb for electricity. This is done without the blockchain. And then on the bottom part of the slide, you see these kind of certificates, who bought from whom, what, when. This certificate, so to say, we write into the blockchain. By the way, it's at the moment we use a blockchain of Ether, and it's a private consortium that uses that. So it's not 100% public, but only the people who are part of it. So this is how the platform looks like for the consumers. So they go there, they can search in their area generators of electricity they would like to buy from. And so they can click on it, they can look at it, they can see, okay, I want to have certain percentage from that photovoltaic plant or from that wind power plant. And then you put it into your profile and you get your mix. And from then onwards, everything is totally automated. We could go to real time. So far, we are not at real time. We're about 15 minutes slots we do. So every 15 minutes, there's a redispatch of the electricity. And it works like you have your preference as a buyer. You say, I would like to have X% from this, Y% from somebody else. It looks at your consumption. So you need a smart meter. I know for Australia, this is probably easier to do than in Europe, because in Europe you have many countries, they still lack a smart meter rollout. So that's a challenge for us, because we need a smart meter otherwise it doesn't make much sense. We could also go to the standard profiles, but we prefer the real profile. So the system sees how much energy you use, and then it asks your smart meter then asks, so to say, the generating PV plant whether they still have capacity, and it buys the electricity from there, totally automated. And there is always a remainder. So in this case, this is a pilot we did in a city called Wuppertal in Germany. So there, for example, it's the waste incineration plant that always provides the delta if you still need something else. And this is a glimpse into the corporate product we are doing. So it's more or less the same as for privates, but on the corporate world, that companies that want to have electricity, renewable energy, electricity every second they need it, or every 15 minutes they need it, they can do this over this platform. They can bring in their own generation, they can bring in their PPAs, and they can then go to the market and purchase the remainder from the market. And everything is kind of in the cockpit of our LBlocks chain. And maybe one word to mention on how you, from an organizational point of view, I mentioned the culture is important. Culture and organization, I think, is absolutely key if you want to do this kind of new technologies in a utility. And you must know Axpo is kind of like many other utilities in Europe. This is a 100-year-old company which has been for most of its life in the monopoly situation. Is building large power stations up to date, and And it has a certain culture, and this culture is optimized for running these huge power plants. And if you then, the question is how you innovate in such a company fast enough. And so the solution here we found for this LBlocks blockchain company is that we say, okay, we transfer it. The idea was created from innovative minds within the mother company, but we spinned it off and created a new company that has a lot of freedom, has their own rules. Obviously, they need to comply with all the compliance things from the mother. But apart from that, they have a lot of freedom to act really as a startup. And I think it's absolutely needed in a way, in a space like blockchain, which is so fast. You have to be fast, otherwise you will not be able to compete. And it's also that the key employees, they have a stake in it. So it's a very entrepreneurial setup. So that's why we created. So just to come to the last slide before we go to the questions is summarizing my conclusions. I would say really there is opportunities in the space of energy, renewable energy, and blockchain. I see mainly the peer-to-peer trading, then more credible solutions for corporate renewable energy, as mentioned, and then also optimizing renewable energy investments. Still very early, but I think there is potential to do more there. And the challenge I see again, it's technology, business models, and the culture. And I think it's absolutely key that, especially as a large utility, that you really get your hand dirty and you try things out. And as mentioned, we at Expo, we try to do two things at the moment. It's this Enerchain, which is wholesale trading on the blockchain. And the other thing is the peer-to-peer trading of renewable energy LBlocks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christoph, for that fascinating talk. We are now coming to questions. Also, for those of you who are online, you can ask your question. Just type it into the chat box or raise your hand button or something, and we will get you online here. So, first question I have over here, and please introduce yourself with name and affiliation. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Carl. I'm from Blockchain X Enterprises. Thanks for the great presentation we've seen and the great knowledge that you've put into it. My question is about the token model. What you have a token model inside your blockchain and how you're using it. Is it something similar to Power Ledger? They're using one tradable token and one internal token, which is called Sparks. And what's your approach to this in your platform?
Thank you very much for your question. We, to be frank, we are not using a lot of the blockchain technology. So it's quite basic. So we do not have tokens. We did not do an ICO yet. We, at the very moment, we simply write these certificates, who bought from whom, we write into the chain. Yes, I think you could elaborate that, and in the future we have plans to elaborate that, to bring out tokens like so many others do, and then trade these tokens, etc., etc. But at the moment we are very simple on that space. What we wanted to do actually is we said we want to have a quick start and it has to be very close to business and business revenues where we see them at the very moment. I think all the tokenization of peer-to-peer trading is very interesting. It might be an important part in the future, but to be frank, I don't see today's business models, at least not in Europe, because as mentioned, we cannot trade directly due to regulations.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. My name is Rob Rouet. I'm a sustainability consultant. There's been a bit of noise about the energy consumption of different types of systems, such as Bitcoin, for example. The energy consumption seems to be huge. What is the smallest amount of energy that you allowed to be traded on your platform? And how small do you think it could go before you start investing more energy in running the system than you can trade?
A very good point. To be frank, I do not know the answer. What is the smallest unit that still is not using more energy on the present? I think it's, in our case, because as mentioned before, we do very little in the blockchain. I think it's a pretty small unit. We don't have a limit downwards on the unit, so you can do very, very small trades on our chain. But to the overarching topic, maybe a comment. You're totally right. It's massive what today's blockchains use in energy. There's a lot of development going on there. So, for example, if you look at Bitcoin, it's enormous, the energy use. Ether is already about, I would say, 10 times better, roughly. But it's still a lot. And in my view, if the blockchains stay at the level of energy consumptions they are today, they will die. They will not be able, or at least they will die in the energy space. It's not feasible, I think. It's not scalable. So, but I think, and I see there's a lot of development of new chains that use much less energy, and it's a must that this develops. Otherwise, as mentioned, I don't see it.
Thank you very much. You can also ask questions of understanding. What is a chain? How does it work? And Christoph will have all the technical answers. Or you can also make comments about use cases where you see it was a hype and now it imploded. So next question here.
Hi, I'm Alejandro. I'm a software engineer. I was just wondering if different platforms were explored for the smart contract development other than Ethereum.
Yes, they are. Ethereum is one of the well-known. I think they started first. But what was special with Ethereum was that it was kind of the second big currency, the Ether, after Bitcoin. And the Ethereum chain, or the Ether chain, has the possibility to do smart contracts, which was missing. This was a missing element in Bitcoin, in the Bitcoin chain. So that was why I think Ethereum is so well known for smart contracts. But there are many others now that can do this as well.
Hi, Grant Lenart's Mineral Assurance. So we're a blockchain mining company. So I was curious about green mining being a large part of people raising money in ICOs. Is that something that you look at, sourcing energy from green sources in the mining, in terms of mining?
Yes, definitely. We look at. And there are, in Switzerland, I have a bit of Swiss view there, or let's say European view. So I see two things. One is, it's always interesting where you have renewable energy that you can't, which you can't regulate, and where you have phases where you're actually producing too much. And so in Switzerland, I think interesting in generation plants are run-of-river plants. So run-of-river we can't really regulate. So whenever the river, whatever water comes down the river, we more or less we have to generate. And even if the electricity price is very low, so you have to generate and to sell to the low market. And so there's one possibility that you say, okay, instead of selling to the very low market during these hours, it's better to mine, for example. And then there are other applications more in Europe where you have big wind farms and PV farms where in time where the market is low, you could think about mining.
And I can just share a little anecdote here. In the cold Melbourne winters, I have a friend's house. I walk into that friend's house and it is nice and cozy and warm. What does he use as a electric heater? He uses a little block of Ethereum miner processors. It's not necessarily cost efficient if you switch it on and off and don't use it 24/7, but certainly if the processors costs would go down, then you could think about electric heating systems based on mining. Anyway, that was just a little anecdote. Next question.
In your thinking about potential use cases for blockchain in the energy industry and examining the regulations around Europe, did you ever play with the idea of an energy-backed general use currency, and what would be the primary obstacles in the way of a general use energy-backed currency? So I would imagine most of those would be regulatory in that space, but did you dig into that at all in your process?
I'm not sure I understand 100% correctly. So you say energy-backed currency? What?
Yes. So kilowatt hours being traded as tokens initially just for the energy market, but because energy is such a significant component of almost all economic activity, that it could be encouraged to be used as a general use currency to pay for other goods and services apart from just purely energy, and the kind of regulatory issues that would bring up with the generators being a de facto currency issuer at that point.
Yeah. Okay, now I got it. Yeah, very, very good point. I didn't look at it through the lens of a currency, but when you go to that box I've shown on the very right, if you remember, the kind of investment into renewable energy through blockchain and tokens, then you actually end up in that space, because what you in the end do, you invest and you give out tokens, and then if the question is what's behind the token, and then one way to go is definitely that it's the energy output of that installation. That's what you get from holding the token, and then you can trade these tokens, and it's a type of a currency. When it comes to we looked at that, yes, and as in many countries, it's still not 100% clear how they would how it would be treated from the regulators. But there's a lot of hints, and you have to conclude in the end that it will not be seen as a utility token, but it will go under the kind of more or less normal financial regulations, which makes it more tricky and more complex. So that's for most countries in Europe, I would say.
Thank you. We have one online question, then we come to you. Adam Bampos, are you ready to ask your question?
Sure. Hi. Thank you, Christoph. Really fascinating talk there. I'm really wondering about how do we get to the next level of blockchain work within utilities, because I think your point and culture is spot on. How do we get from these kind of small scale pilots that are happening now to the much kind of larger role of the blockchain in helping utilities deliver better customer value? What are the kind of examples you've seen of that in Europe? And is it a fundamental culture issue, or is it just an issue of time?
That's absolutely key question. I think it will only scale once we establish standards and standard platforms. Otherwise, you have all these needle-eyes projects like ours, but they will not scale. They will have their niche. So the example I mentioned in the wholesale trading, I think is a good example where all the major traders in Europe came together and said, we do it together. So actually, they were brought together by a blockchain company, but it was also interesting how it developed. So they were brought together by a blockchain company, and they were kind of starting everything, and then all the major traders said, okay, we like this, but we don't like that one company is the hub of everything. We want to have control of it. And they created the foundation that is now running this one chain where all the traders, or almost all the traders, work on it. So that's for trading. But as mentioned, trading is relatively easy, or the wholesale trading. On the end consumer side, there it's very difficult to see how it develops. It will probably go a bunch of years until we see more. We need to change regulations. That takes time. And I think if I would have a vision in that space, it would be that in the end, you would have a standard set, for example, by the grid operators or the grid companies that say, this is a standard, how you, on the chain, how you do peer-to-peer trading in this grid, period.
Hi, my name is Paulina. I'm a sustainability student, and well, I would like to understand a little bit more about blockchain. And so I understand that it's like a database or data that is recorded, and I would like to understand who controls that. Is there only one database, one blockchain? And so is that the private companies that control it, and how many of them there are? And is it easy to get into the business, or there are many barriers? And I would like to understand more of that space.
Okay, sorry for not touching on these basic, these fundamental elements. So to say a blockchain is actually a distributed electronic ledger, you could say. And so it's not a ledger or database where somebody in the center writes all the transactions, but it's done everywhere. So it's really highly decentralized. And to your question, you can use your computer, you can download the software, and you can start being a node of that network. So it's many private and people and companies that run a node, and they run this chain, and all transactions that are done on that chain, everybody writes down this transaction. So if you sell a Bitcoin to me, then everybody in the room, if they're part of the chain, everybody will write down, you sold me 1 Bitcoin. And so this element, because everybody is writing it in parallel, makes it so robust. It's also it's much more robust for cyber attacks than the central thing, because everybody contributes and you can't really cheat around. So that's the positive thing. And the negative thing of that highly decentralized system is that it's so slow, it needs so much energy, it's kind of inefficient. So these are the simple terms, the pros and cons.
Second. Yeah, no.
Myself? Okay. So thanks. So this is, he was talking about the public chain, and you can have consortium chain and private chain. So public chain can be seen by everyone, but the private chains and consortium chains are different. So different applications for the blockchain. And if you are interested and to know more about it, I would like to invite you to Blockchain Center in Melbourne, which is in 710 Collins Street. And we have every Wednesday meetups and people talking about blockchain, so you can learn more. So you can register on Eventbrite or any meetups or a Facebook page as well. So we are part Blockchain Center, Melbourne. Yeah, so it's 720 Collins Street, Stone and Chalk. Okay, so we are part of this community as well, so you can learn a lot today. And thank you for.
Thank you very much for that networking. We have one last question or two.
Hi, my name is Rochelle and I work at Energy Management Consulting. Just at the point as an investor, for example, if I invest in your startup, how would I know that if you find that blockchain is not the scalable or the right platform to go on and carry out your operation, when would be the point for you to decide that, hey, maybe Tangle-based technologies would sort the problem of scalability? How, I would want to know your opinion. When would you know that this is not the right platform for me to work and a new platform has been established? Since this technology is so volatile and evolving every day, when would companies like yours or Power Ledger that have raised $50 million or $30 million, when would they decide that, hey, maybe we need to change the platform and maybe we don't even need to use blockchain? Because there are other platforms that claim that they have better scalability. Sorry, does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, but it's not easy to answer.
Oh.
So kind of two things. One is you mentioned as an investor. So that's a bit, I would say, the downside of these ICOs. You invest your money, your crypto money, you get your tokens, but in most cases you don't have anything to say. So it's a lot of trust, and it's unbelievable what sums of money were raised based on what sometimes it was really not more than a white paper of 20 pages written in a bad quality. And there you have it, and the money is gone. So that's from the investor point of view. But now you, as a company who raised that money, how do you decide when to embark on the next platform? That's really difficult. I would say you give it a try. You try hard to become an important platform, and most of them will not make it, because that's the typical thing about platforms. That's only a few strong ones will survive. And if you're not the one that makes it, then you shut down, or you try to bring your business to the other platform. So that's probably the wise thing, that you have a business model that you can transfer to another platform. The question for me is not exactly when you do that, but I think the key is to build your model and build up your customer relationship, that you are able to shift and you're not stuck with your own platform, which is dying. Maybe.
Hello, my name is Jorge, and I have a solar company, so we do solar installations. I have a question about green mining, and where do you see that going? I know there is a company called Envion. I think they do containers, and that you can just plug into a solar plant. So I just want to see, what is your opinion about the future of that? Is it worth perhaps in getting into that sort of business? Is blockchain going to demand a lot of energy in the future? Thank you.
This plug and play is a green mining element that you can plug into your solar plant. Did I understand that correctly?
What was that?
Envion, Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, Envion
Just
is
make sure I understand. So this plug and play element you mentioned is a green mining element you plug into your solar plant?
Well, I think it's as a company in Europe. So they basically fit a whole container with, I think it's just process computers, and then you just plug them into a solar plant and you can do mining, right?
Yeah. so at the very moment, I think there are probably people in the room who know much more about the economics of mining. But my understanding is that if you mine today, you need to do that 24/7. Otherwise, so it's if you look at the cost, about half of the cost is hardware, and the other half is electricity, roughly. So if you only mine kind of a few hours a day, then it probably is not a good business case. So you should make sure that you can mine at least with today's hardware 24 hours, and if you get cheap electricity in a few hours of these 24, that's great. But otherwise, I think at the moment it's not a business case. But that might change, but it will not change tomorrow. I think it's a few years or maybe a decade where we could imagine a world where you have so much cheap electricity, maybe free electricity during certain, or negatively priced electricity. So you earn money if you destroy electricity. And hardware for mining is much cheaper than today. So in such a world, yes, but we're not yet there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the parallel to the Melbourne heated homes is leave your heater on even in summer. Shantanu, the last question over there.
Hi, I'm Shantanu, working at the college right now. So from your presentation, what I understood that you basically touched the wholesale market. So do you have any plan to bring this technology down to local market, like where I could exchange energy to my neighbor or any of the neighbors on my street? So it's a kind of behind the PCC, the point of common coupling. So do you foresee any kind of this democratization down to the very consumer level? Thanks.
Yeah, actually, maybe I was not clear enough on that. We have two projects, and one is the wholesale, which is the Energybacked project with all the wholesale traders, and the other one is LBlocks. This is peer-to-peer on the end consumer. So the single household can go to that page and buy electricity. I'll show it again. So this I don't know whether you still see the slides. So this is the end consumer page. So you go and you buy your electricity here from a neighbor's solar plant. So that's end consumer market.
One second, we're just making this your slide bigger on our side. A little bit bigger. Okay. Here we go. So this was the interface.
Sorry, it's in German because it's a German city. But you see the map, and so you choose on a map what you want, and on the left you see the profiles. You can click into it, and you see the people behind this PV plant to stories who is selling you the electricity, and you buy directly from them.
Okay, but I think given the time, thank you so much for coming today again. Thank you for all the expertise in the room about blockchain. We, before thanking Christoph Sutter again for that excellent non-NBN presentation, we have next Monday evening event together with BZE, Beyond Zero Emissions, on hybrid lead acid battery and ultracapacitor technology. That's from 6:30 to 8 p.m. You find it also on our website. I don't think it's here, so better check there. No, it's not here. And then on the 29th of October, you might be interested. We have, together with the Australian Wind Alliance, Jay Weatherill, the former South Australian Premier, coming and talking to us on the journey of South Australia to the renewable energy future. That's also not here because there might be more interested people. It's over in Carolo Gardner. And we have another announcement. Yes, 11th of October. Do we know the time yet? 6 p.m. because the IPCC 1.5 degree special report is going to be launched together with Amos. We are going to have an event. What does the IPCC special report mean? So a number of exciting events coming up, but now please join me again. Thank you, Christoph, for this fascinating seminar. And we will edit the pieces about the culture at a big Swiss utility, and that the culture is not thriving and innovative enough. We will edit that out, and then we will post, with your permission, the video online. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Have a good evening.